Hello, everybody. Welcome to Chat with Charles, and I got my buddy JPPAGETOO here with me. Jim, how you doing?
Terrific. Happy Sunday to everybody.
Happy Sunday for sure. Well, Jim, let's go ahead and see who we've got with us in the chat. And
Sure.
So early on at 9:52, we had Herb of Fireside Studios. Welcome in, Herb. And followed by Ryan Hall, who is down in Alabama doing a bunch of yard work for Mama. And so that's right. He's a good guy, and he's doing that. And he says, he's warning you. I got all the questions, but he says I went easy on him, so maybe I'll go easy on you. Gotta love that guy. And Zach Thong says hello to both of us. Hello there, Zach. How you doing? And there's this guy JPPAGETOO in the chat. I
don't know him. New guy.
This is just showing up places now. All right, and we got Big Wave Dave Chase in the chat. Hello there. And let's see. Cushman NYC has made his showing. Good morning, my friend. And of course, Eddie Faye's here saying hello to me and all his guitar friends and JP Page. And Wayne McConnell.
Hey, Wayne.
Wayne's a good guy. Good morning to you. Hit Metalworks is up early and in watching and saying hello to us. Hello there.
Another new guy.
Mm-hmm. Never saw that guy before ever.
Never.
He's followed by Mark's gas station who's saying good afternoon. So it tells you where Mark is, right? Gives you an idea.
East Coaster.
He's an East Coaster for sure. And let's see. My buddy Ferd Burfel from Northeast Texas in the chat. Good morning, my friend.
Hi, Ferd.
Hello, Ferd. And Dastardly Dave saying sup all. Says it all. It's just there's no more needs. I don't know. And we got Ben Coombs, who's saying hello to Charles and Jim. And good morning, Ben.
Hello, Mr. Ben.
And you're in for a treat on Ben's show tonight. He has got none other than Charles Green.
All right.
And so
stories.
And there's some stories. There's going to be a guitar lesson. It is just going to simply be awesome. And I'm not saying anything more than that. Let's see. We got Time Surfing Alien saying good morning, and I love this. I think that's a new pick for him on there.
What is that, a Mustang?
It's offset for sure. It looks almost in the. Yeah, it's offset for sure. Almost more in the. Why can't I come up with the name of it now?
Kind of a BC Rich looking thing.
Yeah, it's almost a Meteora, almost.
Oh yeah, kind of. Yeah, I can see that. One of those new Fender conglomerations.
Yeah, but I don't think it's quite there. But I think it may be. I don't know. It's just hard to tell sometimes. Let's see. There's BC Rich 581. He says, "Hello everyone, welcome from toasty tropical Maryland." And he says Ben Coombs is wearing a headband and a Dayglow on shorts in the honor of Richard Simmons passing. Oh my.
Come on, people, let's go.
And we got Seth Presley of Presley California Customs in the chat with us. Oh, hello there. Hope he's feeling a bit better. Him and his wife had gotten sick with the COVID earlier this week, and so they're just kind of mucking along.
That's okay. People are still getting long COVID from it, man. It's a disaster.
Yeah, they say the numbers are actually kind of going up a little bit.
It's still not a joke. It wasn't a joke before, and it's not a joke now. People are getting sick from it. It's bad. Most people do fine.
Most people do fine, and just take care of yourself. That's what you got to do.
Yep.
Blackjack Guitar saying hello, Charles 75 in Jim and Chatsters. Cheers. Cheers 1. Maybe there's going to be a cheers 2 later on. I don't know. We'll see. I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss anybody here.
You're not chopped liver, William.
Not at all. William, how you doing, bud? Appreciate you. See, and they're just going in the chat today.
John?
Michael B. Live. Michael B. Live has a new video out.
Ooh,
So you might want to go over there and check that out. It was something about a cure for tinnitus, possible cure for tinnitus. William, yes, I get it. You're here, brother William, one of my favorite people. Guy does great glasswork, by the way. Actually, like, and
nice. You make slides, William?
I'm sorry?
Does he make slides?
He's talked about maybe doing that. I think he's made one before, but he does a lot of pipes and stuff like that. And
that's cool.
He made my wife a pendant a couple of years ago. It was real nice. Good morning, John Duchesne. Good morning. Welcome in. Okay, so that catches us up in the chat, at least with welcoming everybody in. And so I think it's time, Jim.
What's that?
It's time for the question.
Okay.
Okay, so how does Jim get started with his guitar journey?
My family's always been very musical. The music played around my house and in the cars all my life. So music's always been a part of me. Mm-hmm. Another part of my journey was my grandmother. She was a fantastic human being. And I used to, when I was a teenager, travel 200 miles to go spend weekends with her.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one time I was at my grandmother's house when I was about 14, and she took me over to my aunt's house, and my aunt had guitars out. I looked at her, I said, "You play guitar?" She goes, "Yeah." She picked it up, put it on her lap, and proceeded to play lap slide, Hawaiian style. I was blown away. I didn't know she even played, let alone had that kind of skills. And of course, at 14 years old, what's your response? I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'd mentioned that I'd really like to learn. And that very next day, she showed up at my grandmother's house with an acoustic guitar. It wasn't the greatest guitar, but it was playable.
Right.
So I took it home, and believe it or not, I actually started learning to play it. And I kept that guitar for a long time. I gave it back to her at the end of her life, and it's now with another family member. But that's
a great full circle kind of thing.
Yeah. So there's another family member learning on that guitar. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it still exists, so I don't feel too bad. It's not out there in the ether somewhere being destroyed by somebody. I know it's in the family still.
Well, yeah, especially you're passing down. It's passing down that gift of music to another member of your family and keeping it going. It's just
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, later on, I started being interested in electric guitar, and that same man who loaned me the acoustic said, "If you ever go buy an electric guitar, I'll get you an amp." So I went out and saved my money and bought an electric guitar, an electric bass at the time, and she bought me an amp, a Heath kit. I had to put it together.
Oh my!
Yeah, I was going, okay, but I did. I assembled it, and it worked, and I still own it today. It's an excellent sounding amp for a solid state amp. So then I started playing electric guitar.
That is funny though. I mean, so what was so you get this amp kit.
Yep.
Right. What was the reaction of? What was your reaction?
Like, what? I was expecting an amp, not a pile of electronics parts that I had to put together. And I barely knew how to solder at the time, but I figured it out and I put it together correctly. It worked right out of the box, and I still own it and it still runs.
That is so cool. That is so
later
cool.
On, my brother Jay, who's an excellent guitar player, sold me my Kramer Barrington. But again, it was another electric acoustic.
Mm-hmm.
About 2000, I was really frustrated. I wanted a guitar that I could play electric. So I looked at my wife and said, "Here's the deal. I'm going to buy a good guitar. And I'm either going to learn to play it seriously or I'll sell it all and I'll be done." So I bought a Gibson Les Paul Special,
mm-hmm.
which is a good guitar. And it's been part of my life ever since. I've played every day or nearly every day since. And that's my guitar journey.
So Where would you like to see this journey go to, though?
Well, I hope to keep playing. I've got arthritis; it runs in my family, and especially in my left hand, which is probably the worst spot to get arthritis for a guitar player,
Yeah.
especially in your thumb. So I hope to keep playing as long as possible. But if not, I have this. I have started to mess around with synthesizers.
Mm.
So, and of course, synthesizer, that's an ARP 2600 clone by Behringer. You can get them for about $700. They're not terribly expensive. But that's what Pete Townsend used to do stuff like all the stuff off Who's Next.
Mm-hmm.
That's the synthesizer he ran his guitar through. It wasn't a keyboard on all those oddball parts. It was a guitar through a synthesizer.
And how challenging was it to figure that out?
It's just like guitar. You have to put some effort into it. You got to learn, envelopes and LFOs and different waveforms. And, there's 1,000 different kinds of synthesis. This uses something they call subtractive synthesis, where you start out with a very complex waveform and you remove frequencies from it. And that was common early on in the 70s. Later on, they added all kinds of the digitals, so to speak. So once you learn that stuff and learn how synthesis works, it's really not that difficult. I wouldn't call myself a great guitar player or a great keyboard player, but you really don't need to be, because you got all the sequencers and arpeggiators and MIDI control from computers. So even if you're not a great keyboard player, you can play synthesizer, and it's fun.
So BC Rich has got a follow-up question to that. He says that was the Bob O'Reilly tone setting, huh?
Yes.
And I want to welcome in Guitar Man 45. He won't be able to stay with us as long as he'd like, but he would just want to say hello to everybody, and he'll see everybody tonight. And
so now I get together with some friends. I had a friend who, played guitar that I met shortly after I got my first good guitar, and we've played together and jammed together ever since. So I go out and play with a pickup band of friends 4 or 5 times a year. It's fun.
Excellent. And apparently Charles Green's hand is doing much better. So that is
awesome. That means you can show us all those new guitar tricks that you learned.
So earlier you talked about the music influence that came from your family, because you're kind of involved in this musical family, and you had that one relative that taught you got you started with guitar. But what have been some of your other influences that have taken you along the way? I think your name kind of tells a lot.
Yeah, I'm an absolutely huge Led Zeppelin fan. Back in the 90s, I collected almost every live show that's available through bootlegs and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Page has always been an inspiration, even going back to when in the 70s, when you didn't have bootlegs available to you. If you did, you had to know the right people.
Right.
But AC/DC back then, with Highway to Hell and all those bands just influenced me. I loved hard rock music, Aerosmith, Black Sabbath, and surprisingly, my parents divorced, and my dad lived near a concert venue over in Saginaw, and a lot of the big bands from the late 70s and early 80s all came through there, and he would help me get tickets. So I got to see a lot of the really great bands back then. I never quite understood why my dad did that. And later on, after my dad had passed, one of my aunts told me, "Oh yeah, your dad used to go to the shows. He went and saw people like the Big Bopper and Buddy Holly and all that kind of stuff." And I go, "Well, that explains quite a bit why he was that way." So my dad saw all those 50s rockers back when they were there back in the 50s. Quite amazing.
Yeah, my dad was a big, a big rockabilly guy. It was the stuff that he primarily listened to. There was always Elvis and Carl Perkins and the big rock. That was all always in my house. But there was such an eclectic thing of music. It was that, and then country music, and then
Well, I grew up in country music territory out here in the wilds of Michigan. That's all you heard. But there were rock stations too. Plus, all the way through school, my sister, she played violin and cello and was quite good at it. I sang in choir. I was all state level as a bass singer. I pursued it quite heavily. So, it wasn't a big leap to go play guitar from where I was.
That is BC Rich says, how cool is that to have seen Buddy Holly?
Yeah, I know. My dad never told me about it. I found out it through my aunts.
Well, and the funny thing about that is, being a fan of that music, of that whole rockabilly thing, I think that's why I'm such a sucker for Hollow Body, right?
Oh, yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
Gretsch was big back then,
Mm-hmm.
Not only in country music that you were influenced by, but rock and roll too.
Exactly. You saw it everywhere. Is there?
Yeah. Gretsch marketed themselves to those artists. They really pushed their instruments toward them, to the Beatles, to the all the great artists of the late 50s. They tried to get their instruments in their hands. Chet Atkins.
And I honestly think the first time that I might have saw a Strat was in a Buddy Holly, watching Buddy Holly play.
Yeah. I'm a Gibson lover, although I don't play Gibsons because I don't sound good playing them. I sound much better playing a Strat. I love Gibsons. I didn't even know what a Les Paul was, but I knew I liked Gary Richrath and Jimmy Page. But it was Gary Richrath that really introduced me to Les Pauls. I didn't know what Jimmy Page played at that time.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because a lot of what Jimmy played was Jimmy played Gibsons, right? So it was he had the hollow the 335 for a while that he played, and he had and then the Les Pauls.
Well, he started out with the Telly after he left the Yardbirds.
Oh, that's right.
He had that Dragon Telly.
Then
in early '69, he picked up the Les Paul from Joe Walsh, and he took off with that. But he always had all kinds of other stuff. I mean, he always played multiple things on the records. He had a Harmony Sovereign for his 12-string. He had a Fender 12. The Stairway to the Heaven stuff was all done on a Fender, not a Gibson.
So when you were teaching yourself, I guess, when you were picking up guitar, were you teaching yourself?
Yes. At first, I did end up taking lessons for about 6-8 months, but that was more just to get me over some blocks that I was having and poor technique that was holding me back.
Mm-hmm.
And that really didn't occur until after I got my Gibson in the 2000s, early 2000s.
All right. So what was your method when you sat down to try to figure out how to play this instrument?
Mel Bay.
Mel Bay books.
Didn't everybody have a Mel Bay book?
Yeah, I'm seriously thinking I need to go pick up some of these because
Mel Bay, lesson 1, man. I mean, it taught you Mary Had a Little Lamb and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. It at least gave you the idea of what you had to do, and it taught you your big cowboy chords. I mean, it wasn't going to teach you a G flat 5 sharp 11 chord, but it at least you could figure things out from there.
Mm-hmm.
If you knew all 12 chords that you needed to know, you could figure them out. Then eventually you found 7th chords and all kinds of, the 5 chords, the rock chords.
Well, were you one of those guys that could sit down with the record player and
Hell no. No, I needed somebody to show me what the heck to do. I didn't have the ear then. After singing through high school, I developed a better ear, but I'm still not a guy who can sit there with the record and learn to play stuff very well.
Uh-huh. And that is, I don't know. I don't know how people do that because it's not something that I can do at all. right? It's I can watch a video of someone playing it and kind of figure it out, right? Or to some degree because I can spot the chords that I know, but and if someone's showing you how to do it, then I think that's really the way that makes it easy for me. But sitting there trying to just listen to something and figure it out,
Yeah, the bad part back in the 70s, tab wasn't a thing. I mean,
yeah,
it was all sheet music, and it was trying to figure out. I could read music from singing, but translating that to a guitar is a whole different animal. It's nothing like learning to sing because there's only one way to sing a G. G in the fourth octave is G in the fourth octave. There's 4 ways to play that on a guitar.
I love this. Exterior Bill was saying, talking, they're all playing off the whole Mel Bay book, right? And so he had the old white and red Mel Bay book. And his follow-up comment to that is, I found seeds in mine.
There we go. Yeah. That was probably as far as they got. It sat on the desk. That was the last page they ever used.
Well, that's like you just start thinking of he's flipping the pages. What's the last page you found seeds on?
We used to find seeds in our used albums, the gatefold albums.
Oh, that's hilarious. Something you don't think about.
No.
So what was that first song that once you started playing that you decided, okay, I need to learn to play this song?
Wow, I don't know if I remember that because I was dabbling in all kinds of different stuff at the time. It had to be something really simple, working with 5 chords or something. Maybe something like a Black Sabbath song or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't think I ever, back then, when I was beginning, learned a song all the way through. I did the typical thing of learning the licks that caught my ear, and then I would adapt those to, I know how to apply that elsewhere, and then I'd learn something else. I was terribly unfocused as a young man.
Well, as most of us are, right?
Yeah,
Let's be honest.
That's who I was.
God, that's so funny. So when you were picking and selecting guitars, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that you looked for?
I never bought a guitar sight unseen. Mm-hmm. Every guitar I've ever owned, I've played before I bought it.
Had to put your hands on it.
Yeah. Usually it was the tone. Although that Gibson that I did end up buying, I ended up selling it on to a friend because it just didn't fit me very well. I ended up buying another one of the same model that I love much better. And then I searched for a Strat for probably 10 years before I found the one. I picked it up in the guitar store and strummed it a few times. I said, oh, this one's different. And I took it up front and I gave him $200 and I said, I'll be back tomorrow with the other 300 because Mexican Strats were $4.99 then.
Yeah.
And came back, picked it up the next day, and I've never set that guitar down since. That's my number one.
Gotta love that.
Yep.
Symmetry is with us. He's watching from bed with one eye open. So saying cheers to everybody.
Wake up, Trev. Coffee.
I really appreciate the guys on the West Coast that get up early to watch this because it's it's a time they're sitting, getting up and watching this. I'm still sleeping myself. So
yeah, but they got the advantage. I have a job where I have to work fairly early in the morning on weekdays. So Ben's show starting at 8 o'clock is right at my limit where I have to start thinking about going to bed. So they get to see that without pushing it.
I love Steven's question. Trev, which eye? Right or left?
His good eye.
His good eye. And hello, Patrick Trites. Welcome in. Welcome in. And everybody's saying hello to Trev because he's just so popular. Great guy. Great guy for sure. All right. So, but it would appear that guitar has not been your only interest, right? Because we've talked about the synthesizers behind you, and And you kind of been known in the community for a certain talent with a certain piece of equipment.
For amps. Yeah. How did that start? Well, originally, when I went off to college, I wanted to be an electrical engineer. That didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I became a mathematician. I got a degree in applied math. When I started, after I got my first good guitar, I realized that solid state amp that my aunt had bought me was a little lacking. I mean, it was okay to learn on, but it wasn't an amp that I was going to go play with other people with. It just wasn't going to happen. So I bought a Fender Blues Junior, and I absolutely fell in love with tube tone. But I realized that if there was problems, it was going to be expensive to maintain those things because I knew what amp techs charged, and I didn't want to pay that. I'm a little frugal.
Right.
Sorry, it's just true.
Well,
I face that fact. So I thought, well, I better learn to fix these things. And as part of having an interest in electronics, I started buying all the books and learning how amps worked. And that led me to fixing amps and building amps from scratch and everything else. And that's how I got interested in amps. And it's just kind of grown from there. Now I'm kind of known for amps more than guitar playing, which might be a good thing.
It's funny because I think that is a kind of a theme for guys of our generation, right? He's like, I don't want to pay someone else to do it.
Yeah.
So I'll find out, do it myself, even if it isn't perfect.
Well, I mean, how did you get started with fabric tops? You just decided that sounded cool and you learned to do it.
Exactly. I had a guitar that was just ugly and a piece of crap, and I had bought it for just for the neck, and that neck didn't fit the guitar I wanted to put it in. And I was like, well, I'm not going to get any money for this thing the way it is. And so, and I asked Ben, should I paint it or should I, I had heard him talking about fabric tops, right? I wasn't really aware of what a fabric top even was.
I've never heard of it until you did it.
Yeah. And, so I asked him, he said, well, there's not enough fabric tops in the world. So then I went over to, I went over to Texas Toast because I knew they did fabric tops, and I watched all their videos on how they did them, and I learned from there. And then I did it, my own way, way, which is, but I'll give them all the credit in the world. They got me started on that, and so it's been a lot of fun since.
Eddie Faye, no, I don't work in the electronics industry at all. I went to school, got a degree in mathematics applied to computer science. And back in the late 80s when I graduated, computer people who knew actually what they were doing were rare and in demand. So I ended up going into computer programming, especially databases, because every company in the world runs off a database. I mean, all their billing systems and inventory management's all done through database. And that's what I've done for a career for the last 35 years.
And Ben is chiming in here that he learned guitar setups 35 years ago because
exactly. I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Dan Erlewine's book and figure it out. Funny story, that original bass, electric bass I bought, when I bought it, it didn't have a bridge. Dan Erlewine literally lived 35 minutes from me in Big Rapids, Michigan. And I paid him to build a bridge for my bass.
No way.
Yeah. That bass disappeared. I looked for it. I think I gave it to my brother who, the guitar player. I think I traded it to him and it disappeared. I never found it again. It's no big deal. It was nothing special. It was a piece of crap. But it was worth learning on.
I don't know who. Well, yes, I always blame you. It is your fault entirely. It is
everything's your fault.
Everything's just his fault. And so just get used to it. It's gonna happen. Oh, and BC Rich says 13 bases here with setup and general repair costs. He had to learn.
Exactly. And the same thing happens with amps. If you've ever taken an amp that's had a problem, not just a tube job, I mean, they charge you $50 just to open it up to tell you that they can fix it or not.
Right. Yeah. They charge you the $50. They open it up and they say, "Oh, this thing's shot. Forget it."
Yeah. Nowadays, all these amps are all surface mount stuff. All these new amps, it's a disaster. You replace boards, you don't fix amps anymore.
And the interesting thing about since I came to guitar really late, so I had the advantage of YouTube and the Google and being able to find everything pretty easily. But I think about you learning amps, learning how to do amps, and Ben with his comment here, he said he paid for a setup once and asked the guy if he could watch him, and that was how he learned to do it.
Yeah,
asked a bunch of questions along the way. So, how hard was it for you to really master that whole idea of working with an amp and feeling comfortable opening it up and doing mods and feeling like you really knew what you're talking about?
it took me about 3 years of serious study. I mean, I'd sit down in the evenings when I was relaxing and open the book and learn it. It wasn't easy, but once you learn the concepts, it all becomes really obvious. I can look at a schematic and tell you what every part in it does and why it's there.
That is amazing to me because I look
what would happen if I changed it to a different value.
It's that like I said, that is just amazing to me because I look at that stuff and I'm like, how did they even figure out how to put this together? Right, that I need this and this of this value, and it's
Yeah, the history of vacuum tubes is fascinating, and a lot of it was done in research labs like Bell Labs and Westinghouse, and a lot of those circuits were developed by really early engineers. Fender just bought an amp circuit book and copied them, and then licensed the circuitry. He didn't design a lot of his early amps.
So is there like a favorite thing that you've done to an amp that you kind of think back on and that you would recommend everybody do with that particular amp?
I currently play a Randall RM50, which has what they call analog modeling. You replace the preamps. It's eventually become this, what do they call it? Bruce Ignator designed them. And you could pull the preamps out and exchange the preamps for different ones. Like you could put a blackface preamp in, or you could put a SL preamp in. The neat thing about those preamps were you could open them up and change components and redesign it. So you could learn to play with things and figure out what they were doing and how a change would sound without having to monkey up an expensive amp. You only had $100 preamp piece that you could mess with. So learning how to work there taught me a lot about how to make amps sound good.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, I just went out and bought all this stuff, transformers and tubes and tube sockets and all this stuff, and just build amps from scratch to learn about them.
That is beyond cool. Eddie Faith got a good question. How much money and trial and error getting zapped and understanding the schematics did it take?
I don't think I've ever really been zapped. I'm really cautious because I know what the voltages are in these amps, and I really didn't want to leave my family wondering why I was down there working on 600 volt amps by myself and that they had to bury me. So I never really got zapped, but I've spent a lot of money on tubes and that kind of stuff for experimentation. I still have boxes and boxes of different tubes. It's really surprising. You look at things like 12AX7s and EL34s and 6L6s. Those are common audio tubes, but just about any of those tubes can be used in an amplifier. Some of the tubes are designed for different applications, but they all have the same characteristics. And once you have a tube chart, you can use them for anything you want. So a lot of those tubes, I bought huge boxes full of tubes at auctions for pretty cheap. And, I still have them. And if I want to build an amp out of oddball stuff, I can. My favorite little home build amp was built out of a tube set they call the All American 5, which is a set of tubes that had heaters built for 120 volts round circuit. So you didn't have to have special transformers for the heaters. And they were originally designed for radios. There were 5 tubes that they could build a radio from. Well, 4 of them were useful in designing an amp: a preamp tube, a rectifier, output tube, and the different pieces. So you didn't have to make a radio out of it. You could just make an amp, and that's what I did.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
It's I think that's one of the things I'd like to do, but I don't know if I'd ever figured that out.
Well, if you go back to some of Ben's shows, I showed a couple books that are great places to start. Those books are still available. If you have any electronic skills whatsoever, you can figure it out. It seems like it's higher tech than it is, but it's really not that complicated.
All right.
But then again, I'm a mathematician.
Of course, yeah. But Gear Junkie 35 says that the bright cap mod is something that every amp needs.
All a bright cap does is bypass the volume control, the gain control between the first and second stages of the preamp. That's all it does, because when you turn down the volume control, it forms a high frequency roll off, and it takes away all your highs. All a bright cap does is allow you to bypass that potentiometer that turns down the gain, allows the highs to go around it, just like it does in a guitar. There's the bright cap in a guitar too. It works exactly the same way.
Okay.
I don't disagree with that, especially if you got a very loud amp, a 100-watt amp that you can't play at that volume. It helps to have a bright cap when you turn them down. But I like them switched where you can take them in and out, because it's not something you want all the time.
I got you. Let's see. Our buddy Ferd says he spent almost a year, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, learning basic electronics theory when he first joined the Navy back in the 70s.
Yeah. Like I said, it took me 3 years of self-study to do it. So I can believe that. And the Navy was giving you training. I was learning it all on my own. I learned it. And once you learn it, you don't forget it. It's there. You can open up an amp and go, okay, that one determines the gain. That one's the bias. That one, does this. That's a blocking cap, DC blocking cap. That's a phase inverter. It's easy.
He says the guy that does it all. Well, when you were talking about different tubes and you got to EL34s, John perked up a bit.
In my Randall, you can run whatever tubes you want. You just got to rebias the amp. I run EL34s. I like the sound of them. I put 6L6s in it. Tried several different sets. I didn't like the sound of 6L6s. I really like EL34s.
So are the EL34s your favorite?
Yes.
And
but you got to realize EL34s from 50s and early 60s are a different tube than what they call EL34s today. EL34s are really just a redesigned 6L6 with slightly different characteristics. They're what they call a beam tetrode. They used to be a true pentode, and they're not. They don't make any. Nobody makes a true pentode output tube anymore. They're just too expensive.
And so, is your preference for the older EL34s if you can get your hands on them?
I like the new ones. The new ones are fine.
Okay.
It's just they have a different sound. They have different characteristics.
I see.
How you design the plates and the grids and all that stuff makes a difference in how they sound. So the L34s are different than 6L6s, but they use the same basic electrical design on a beam power tetrode. If you look that up, you'll understand what I'm talking about.
Definitely will. So Herb is saying, so Jim, what do you feel is the best amp on the market currently?
I really, really like the Fender reissues. It's really hard to argue with those. They're expensive, but man, they sound great. Um, I pretty much like everything that's not all surface mount. I get frustrated by surface mount because you can't fix them.
Right.
It takes specialized tools, and everything's micro tiny. So when they break, you're not really fixing them. All you're doing is swapping out parts. You pull out this board, put in a new board, and put stuff back, and you fixed it. Whoopee.
Yeah, that is everything has kind of gotten that way. Cars are the same way. Mechanics aren't really mechanics; they're replacement specialists.
Yeah, they hook it up to a computer and it says this part's bad on your car. Replace it. That's why I love the old tube amps. If you look at my amp collection, other than that Randall is all discrete parts too, which I like. But all my other amps are old Fenders and old Gibsons from the '60s.
Nice. And Dashley Dave says Ignator puts on some great amp building classes.
I took both as beginning class and as advanced class. I was already had spent the 3 years learning, so I knew what I was doing. But I learned a lot from Bruce. Bruce is a very, very smart amp designer.
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing but respect for him.
Eddie Fay says, book Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, Learning from Others' Mistakes and Lessons. That's the key. How electrical engineers envision design circuits to achieve the thing is mysterious.
That's like I said. I mean, Leo Fender did it. He didn't design those amps. He just copied circuits and then licensed them.
Right.
And then his biggest achievement was making it durable. He built amps that could stand the abuse of life on the road.
And Gear Junkie 35 appreciated that explanation. I thought it was implemented differently when you were talking about the treble
34s.
Yep. No, before when we're talking about the treble bleed on the amp.
No, all it does is bypass between the first and second gain stage. There's a gain pot, and all that does is allow the high frequencies to go around that gain pot, because when it's turned down, it shunts all your high frequencies to ground. It's a tone control.
There you go. And Monch says he grew up in his uncle's TV repair shop, so Miss Ellie's RCA.
Yeah, that's cool.
That is cool.
Remember when there were TV places and stereo places?
Yeah.
It's all gone.
I miss those old repair shops like that.
Yeah, there used to be a TV repair shop in every town, because color TVs were half a year's salary.
Mm-hmm.
My family didn't have a color TV until probably 1973, and my dad made a good living.
It is Gear Junkie is all over this topic, because he's talking about EL34s here, and then he's jumping into the 6L6s and talking about it, and then he goes, Glenn Fricker is right. In 20 years, will be considered. I'm sorry, Glenn Fricker is right, and in 20 years, will be considered a genius for doing all the hard work with the EQing graphics and everything, showing how tubes and pickups are just equalizers.
That's all it really is. I mean, that's why you can emulate it through software. They're just, if you look at something like the modern amp modelers, what's the one that you can record into? All they are is IRs. They take a given set of frequencies in and make sure that you get a given set of frequencies out. That's all modeling is. How they work is they take and they put a signal that goes all the way from 20 kilohertz to 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and they equally loud volume, and then they figure out what the response is of that device, amp or whatever, and that's the model. It's an impulse response.
Interesting. Well, Ben's got a question for you. Are you ready for it? So he says, so did Fender ever make a louder Princeton? Also, why is the Princeton the perfect amp?
The Princeton changed over the years. It wasn't one amp. It's actually one name, but they had different versions of it that had different tube configurations on the outputs. And yes, there was some that were push pull, and there were some that were Class A single ended amps, and the push pull amps were much louder. Why is the Princeton a perfect amp? I don't know that it's perfect for everything. Certainly a great studio and practice amp. I don't think I would take it to a bar gig. I just don't think it's loud enough for that. I think you really need 25 watts or so to play in a bar gig with a drummer that's got to play over the people talking.
But I think a lot of us home players really like that Princeton because you can put so many effects on it. It's just kind of like the perfect.
Yeah, you can use it as a clean amp under slightly lower volumes, or you can turn it all the way up and let it compress and distort, and it sounds great that way too.
Now, could you take a Princeton and make it louder?
Sure. Look at what Randall Smith did with Fender amps in the early Mesa Boogies. I mean, he basically took Fender Deluxes and put EL34s and 6L6s as output tubes and turned them into 100-watt fire breathers. So you can make them as loud as you want. You just got to be prepared for, can you cool it in that small of an area? And, will it last? I just find swapping boards to be so wasteful. We got enough electronic waste in this world. You know, I'd much rather go and replace a cap and a resistor and be done with it and continue to use the stuff that's still working than throw out a whole board full of components because I can't desolder something.
Right. It is for someone of our generation to sit there. The idea that you can't just fix stuff anymore.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
It is. But I understand why the manufacturers do it, because it's cheaper for them to make a whole board than it is for them to stuff it with individual components. It's all a matter of cost. They can do the surface mount and, wave soldering way cheaper than they can pay somebody to stuff a whole board full of components and solder it.
Everyone is reminiscing here. Presley.
I have a tube tester.
His first job was in a TV repair shop, and
I have a tube tester.
Yeah.
Every grocery store, every TV repair shop, every Radio Shack, they all had their big thing, test your tubes here, and then you test it and say good or bad and tell you what you needed. You opened up the thing at the bottom and pulled out the tube you want and took it inside and paid for it. And nobody stole the tubes.
Yeah, you couldn't do that today, wouldn't you? No. Let's see.
Yeah, the world's different. And I'm a person who likes change, but there's some change I would wish we could go back and be like it was.
Well, it's just for me, just what you were talking about with the electronic waste, right? There is so much out there, and that's something that we could do. There's something we could do to make a difference is to keep it back, to change it back that way. But it's not going to happen.
What I'd like to see, at least in America, is we have all these places where you can take back your glass and you can take back your cans and all that kind of stuff to get it recycled. They don't have a spot where you can just dump your electronic waste and so that it goes out of the waste stream.
Yeah, it is getting really hard to find a place where you can take that stuff.
Yeah,
and
you have to pay to have it
taken care of, right?
Yeah. Fortunately, at work we go through lots of electronic waste because of all the computers and servers and that. And fortunately, the ownership has got enough obligations that they're willing to pay, the recyclers to come in and take all this stuff and get it recycled. I like 100-watt amps. They're just not a practical thing. I mean, if you're going to gig with them, good luck. Nobody wants to see the evening's band all show up with 100-watt amps and 4x12s. They just don't want to see it. The sound man looks at you like, you aren't going to play that, are you?
So Rico was asking, does Fender make a digital Princeton? And while we were taking too long to get to it, Ben answered it and said, yep, but it's not even close to the tube version.
Yeah, there is a new version. They do their modeling things of single amps. They're okay. It's never going to be the same.
I love this. All right, so we can expect a future video from William De Silva and the Electric Waste. Oh.
I wasn't expecting to get into amp chat today, but that's okay. Whatever people want to talk about, I'm good.
You never know where this whole thing is going to take you, right?
People seem fascinated by amps. I don't know why.
I think because for a lot of us, it is a bit of a mystery, right?
Yeah.
Unless you've studied it and have kind of figured it out, then it's a mystery, and so you're in awe of someone that has that knowledge.
And maybe also because it's technology from the early half of the past century, because tube amps really haven't changed since 1965.
Well, and it's a thing. It's a technology from there that we all still want to use, and we're fascinated by it, and we're afraid it's going to disappear. I think
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, especially about something I love like tube amps, but they are going to go away. They're just so dirty to make. I mean, tubes are just an absolute ecological disaster to manufacture. And the only place they're being made are places where they don't care. But eventually they'll care.
Yeah.
Because it'll be polluting everything around, and it'll be killing people in Russia and China and Eastern Europe, and then they're going to go away. If you like tube amps, make sure you have some spares that are going to last your lifetime, because there's going to be a time where they're going to get super, super, super expensive and be really hard to get.
Wow. Yeah. Well, Josh got a new guitar yesterday. He scored an ESP LTD EC 1000 for $275.
Wow, that's a good price.
Yeah, and not to be outdone, Time Surfing Alien was Friday was his new guitar day. He got a Firefly 338. So, and I've got those Firefly 338s. They're not too bad. I do like my Univox better, but they're not too bad for what you're spending on them. Let's see. Just try to see what we got. And so Gear Junkie 35 says he's personally he personally has always been fascinated by how these bits and pieces make the beautiful noises that they do.
The actual amps themselves, I pulled back the curtains and learned the magic behind them. But the tubes themselves, how they came about and how they actually work, is absolutely amazing, and it is truly nuclear physics.
Josh is providing. I'm sorry, Jim. I got distracted. Josh is providing all the information, and he says he needed a deep cleaning, but it's got the EMGs in it. But here's the part that has me rolling. Are you ready?
Yep.
He says, I messaged the dude from the toilet the second he posted it.
No wonder it needed a deep cleaning.
Oh. And then BC Rich, it was new guitar day for him on Tuesday. He has an SG that he bought off of Phil McKnight, arriving at the height of the heat wave, and it was shipped from Mesa. What could go wrong?
Nothing could go wrong there. Shipped to Canada?
Oh.
I had, when I bought my first Tele, I was actually in the market for an SG, and I played every SG in Grand Rapids, and I couldn't find one that I could make a decent sound out of. Me and SGs, I guess, are never going to mix.
I've kind of had that same thing with me where I just don't bond. I have not bonded with a Les Paul yet. I've had a couple nice ones, and but I don't know, I could not identify anything wrong with them, right? There wasn't anything I didn't like about them. But as nice as they looked and as nice as they played, I did not pick them back up often enough.
I
Right?
found Gibson's a one-trick pony. Hell of a trick. But if that ain't your sound, you're going to be disappointed with all Gibsons. Those humbuckers have just a specific thing that they do, and you're not going to get them to like a Stratocaster where you can get 30 sounds out of them. It's just not what a Gibson is.
Well, our buddy Zach Thong, he was when he was in high school, he had a Fender Princeton Reverb amp, and he used it a lot. It was a lot of fun playing through, and the good thing was he didn't have to take his own amp. Oh, okay, so I guess the high school had one.
Oh, the high school had one. Wow, that's nice.
That's cool.
I grew up out in rural Nowhereville in Michigan, and that kind of stuff just didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
There were no guitar teachers. The nearest guitar store was 40 miles away, and 35 miles away and you just couldn't get that. Pedals were $75 back in the 70s. That was unobtainium to me. I mean, I didn't have $75. I was making $3 an hour picking rocks on a field. When you're baling hay for $3 an hour and 95 degrees and humid, you ain't gonna spend $70 on a guitar pedal.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't gonna happen.
So thank you, Herb. Herb says, thanks for today's show, Charles. It's always a pleasure to learn more about the people from our community, especially nice to see Jim.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And so Time Surfing Alien, and there you go. Okay. Any suggestions for a stand for multiple guitars?
I got one.
Okay.
Make one. You can make them out of PVC tube and whatnot. You can make it as many as you want, hold as many guitars as you want, durable, cheap. You can resize them as long as you don't, weld all the pieces together. And you put a little bit of pipe insulation on them, and it's soft and it doesn't ruin finishes. Works great. That's what I did.
Yeah, and I just got the the standard rack over here behind me, so it seems.
Yeah, I got one that holds 8 guitars over there, and it's just all it is PVC tubes, and
No, that's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah, there's a couple videos out on the YouTube. Imagine that show you how to make them. And
there are videos on YouTube.
Yeah,
really?
They tell you how to do things cheap. And again, it's my frugalness. I wanted what I wanted, and I didn't want to pay a lot of money for it.
And no, I am right there with you, my friend. I am right there with you. So, Sadie,
if you wonder why I do anything, you can almost trace it back to the fact that I don't want to pay somebody.
Yeah, of course. And so Sadie Lampdudo said he was looking at an SG, but decided to go with a Jackson 22 Solo instead.
Well, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up buying a Telecaster, then fell in love with Telecasters.
Exterior Bill says he disagrees. LPs are two-trick pony if you play a little jazz.
Yeah. So you put it on the neck pickup and roll off all your tone controls, turn it into Mr. Dark. But they, Gibsons have that nasally, mid-rangey tone that if you can't get your head around it while you're playing, you're going to be frustrated by them. That's just how Gibsons are. But if you learn to play that tonality, look at what Jimmy Page did with it. Look what Ed King did with it. Look what all the great Les Paul players did with it. I mean, it's amazing, but I could never get that sound.
And like I said, I'm not going to sit there and say anything bad about anybody, but it's that particular guitar just doesn't do it for me. I don't know what it is. And I can't, in Jim, I just can't, honestly, I can't identify what it is.
I've tried. I own a beautiful white Les Paul Custom. I got it for $1,100, which was a song when I bought it. And I played it and just wasn't a thing for me. I own one Gibson now.
There you go. And Ben Coombs is reminding everybody that everyone needs a telly, and that's a fact.
You're wrong, Ben. Everybody needs 2 tellies.
That is, it's funny. I really thought I was completely a Strat guy until I picked up my first telly, and I was gone from there. Forget it.
You know, I love tellies. The weight's great on them. The only thing I wish that a telly had is a belly cut.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not terribly overweight, but it still digs into your ribs and stuff, especially if you're playing in a chair. So I wish it. I stand corrected. We'll argue about that next time I'm on your show, Ben.
Mm-hmm. And Sadie Lamp Duo says he's got a son performing around Grand Rapids, Holland area, David Lemkin.
Yeah, I work in Holland.
So
cool.
So his son performs out that way. So
I'll have to keep an eye out for him.
So BC Rich says he never liked tellies until he played one with a neck humbucker, and he liked that setup. He has an Asset Classic and a Fender, but his Fender has 2 humbuckers and neck through.
Yeah, it's amazing how the Gibson seems lacking to me with the humbucker, but tellies don't.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a telly with the traditional pickup set in it, and then I've got a telly with Seymour Duncan hot rails in it, and I love them both. They sound great.
Yes, Ben, we know you've got a belly cut on your Mim telly. Yes. Here you go.
Need it more every day.
Yep. Well, Jim, I want to thank you for coming on. I didn't even realize it's 12:01 already.
Wow. Fantastic.
We went right through it. You've been an absolutely wonderful guest.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you coming on. We've been wanting to do this for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago when I offered, I really want, after watching your chat with Charles, I really wanted to sit down and talk with you.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate it. This is always a pleasure for me to get to know the guys in the community a little bit better. But even the ones that I get to see all the time in the Water Buffalo meetings, it's you find out a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, like you never knew why I played guitar. I never knew why a lot of the people you interview play guitar. It's nice to hear their stories too.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So we're gonna go ahead because I know that Music Therapy Labs is probably
we don't want to run into somebody else's show here.
2 minutes here in a minute, and so don't want to run over on that. But make sure you go ahead and watch Music Therapy Labs. Go over and watch the OU812 crew. Their Sunday show is always a blast. And you're going to be an absolute fool if you miss the Ben Coombs show with Charles Green tonight. I'm just saying. So,
I agree.
Jim, thank you again for coming on. Everybody, thank you for being here and being part of this. It's the reason why. We do it. It's for bringing this community closer together. So, with that, we're going to go ahead and head out. Enjoy the rest of the shows on Sunday, and we'll see you next week.
I'll probably see everybody on Pete's show. I always hang out for that. I don't usually post, but I'll be there.
There you go. Jim, hold on. I'll be back with you in a minute.
Okay.